Welcome to Pretoria Prime. On January 1st, 2026, Diesen sat down with Alex Krainer to ask a question few dare to voice. Is the West's greatest strength, unity, now its greatest illusion? In this episode, New York Times reports CIA attacks on Russian tankers. The quiet collapse of order meets strategic recalibration. Listen closely. This New Year's chatter about CIA strikes on Russian tankers and a reported attempt on Putin's residence isn't just another episode in the fog of war. It's part of a larger tectonic argument. As Alex Krainer put it on Diesen's program, Project Ukraine is sinking under the wave and Russia is winning the war. That claim, whether you accept it or not, forces us to read the headlines as symptoms, not causes. The deeper thesis threading through that conversation is stark. A Trump-aligned strategic current in Washington is quietly steering toward replacing the post-1945 NATO-EU architecture with a multipolar order that cooperates with Moscow and Beijing. It is not fringe theory in the interview. It is anchored in policy language and patterns of action. For example, the line Krainer cites from the US National Security Strategy that the United States would cultivate the movements in Europe that opposed Europe's current direction, which is, authoritarian, dictatorial, and so forth. Read literally, that is a plan to nurture sovereigntist currents that break European consensus. Read geopolitically, it is a playbook for disassembling supranational constraints that once bound Allied policy. You can see the cracks Macron, Pistorius, Stubb, and a handful of Europeans who were once the loudest war hawks are suddenly softening. That rhetorical flip matters. As the speakers note, if the West can't sustain narrative control, one day the Russians are coming, the next day, no plans to attack us, unity dissolves. What they called out sharply was Russia's deliberate restraint. Drawing a line from the U-boat era that pulled the United States into World War I, Krainer and Diesen warn that Moscow will avoid blows that hand the West a unifying pretext. That restraint changes the risk calculus. Russia's objective looks less like gratuitous escalation and more like political reconfiguration. Who sits in Kiev, who controls Odessa and the Black Sea, and whether NATO's footprint survives in practice. Some allegations in the conversation, mysterious sabotage of space programs, speculative assassinations, are raised more as interpretive signals than evidentiary claims. Those should be framed as allegations and patterns worth investigating, not certainties. The interview leans on structural analogies, Belovecha, 1991, WWI triggers, which are useful, but analogies are not outcomes. The episode exposes an uncomfortable operational truth. If Washington does indeed prefer sovereigntist partners in Berlin, Paris, Budapest, and beyond, then the dissolution of EU-level consensus could be engineered as much by soft power and funding channels as by tanks or treaties. That raises the hard questions the guests barely pause to ask aloud. Why again do elites prefer quiet realignment to open debate? Who benefits from a Europe that must print its own money and rearm? Who controls the silence when regime change is a strategic tool? The stakes are plain. If Odessa and the Black Sea are the fulcrum, control there would shape logistics, intelligence, and asymmetric options for a generation. If Kiev is replaced by a government Moscow deems acceptable, the military map changes without wholesale conquest. And if a US pivot toward sovereigntists is real, the remaking of Europe will be as much political as territorial. This moment demands scrutiny, not surrender to inevitability. As Krainer reminds us near the end, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. Ask who is rewiring the architecture, insist on transparent debate, and remember that quiet realignments decided in backrooms will determine whether the next order is more plural and peaceful or simply quieter and more contested. That's it, my friends. Please like and subscribe to support my channel. You can find more content on my Spotify and on YouTube under the handle @Pretoria Prime. Until we meet again, this was Scipio Americanus of Pretoria Prime News.